Shalom and welcome to Nazarene Israel. My name is Norman Willis. And in this presentation, we're going to talk about how not to end up with your Aviv barley shattered and all over the ground. And doesn't it seem like every year we have problems about the barley time? Every year there's a big fight and a big kerfuffle. And so I'm praying and I'm asking Yahweh, every year it's like, Yahweh, why is it, why is it this way? Every single year, why do we have the barley wars each and every year? And I know that a lot of you have written in and you've said, this grieves my spirit. Why do we have this problem? How can we understand this? What is going on? So I'm praying and I'm asking Yahweh, Father, please, I ask him every year, please, won't you show me what is the problem? What is the deal? And he showed me this year. So this is a rough presentation. I'm just going to put it out here to you. We'll try to make it more refined in the future, but I know that a lot of you are having trouble even now with all the fighting that goes on over the barley. So we're going to explain the whole thing. And to me, it's the same kind of a thing. I ask Yahweh, Father, why do we have these troubles? And he led me to Bereshit, or Genesis 25, starting in verse 22, where Rivka has two children are growing inside of her, the twins, and they're struggling, they're fighting within her, just like we have fighting within the movement. And she's like, if everything is okay, then why am I this way? So she went to ask Yahweh. And Yahweh said to her, okay, you've got two nations in your womb. You've got two peoples that are going to be separated from your body. And respectfully, one people shall be stronger than the other, and the older shall serve the younger. So she gives birth to twins, and then there's a big struggle between them. And we're going to talk more about that. But what we're going to see here in the barley movement is that what we effectively have is we have two main barley camps within Israel. We've got the Torah Model camp, which is basically pioneered by the house of Joseph, by the white horse. And what we're doing is we're trying not to break scripture. We want to go by what the Torah says. So we're going for the true first fruits of barley. Why? Because it's symbolic of Yeshua, who we're told in the renewed covenant is our first fruits. And then we try to go by the scriptural definitions of what are the first fruits and what should that look like. We don't want to break Yahweh's Torah commandments. Okay, well, now respectfully, you've got another camp inside the nation of Israel. You've got those who are clinging to the Talmudic model. And we're going to see that this Talmudic camp has certain characteristics that define them. Not in every case, you do have some exceptions to the rule, but what you're going to see, the certain characteristics that you're going to see time and again within the Talmudic model camp, is you're going to see that they're going to want basically what we're going to call manicured harvest fruits. They're going to want manicured fields, and they're going to want perfect wave sheaves. And that's the thing. They're not going to want to bring Yahweh the first and finest. They're going to want to bring Yahweh the finest, even if it's not the first. Okay, so it's like they have half of the commandment. That's one of the things that makes it so confusing. Another thing that makes it confusing is we understand in the Torah model camp, we understand the requirement not to break Deuteronomy or Devorah 16 and verse 9. We don't start our count to Shavuot until the day of the wave sheaf offering, and that's when we start to cut, which is also what Josephus says. Well, your Talmud model camp is going to do what rabbis and other Talmudists always do. They're going to redefine what Yahweh's Torah commandments mean. They're not going to take Yahweh at face value. They're going to explain part of Yahweh's commandment away so they can have things their own way. And we're going to see that again and again in this presentation and in other presentations. Another characteristic that we're going to see is, the thing works fine. The Joshua 5 model works fine if your nation is all right there together. If you've got the barley fields that you are harvesting are within a day's walk of your temple or tabernacle. But when the nation becomes spread out, as they were later in the land, this model breaks down. It doesn't work anymore because you have to be in two places at once. One, you have to be up by the tabernacle or temple worshiping. At the same time, you're out in your fields harvesting your barley and Once Israel spreads out, you're several days travel away. So it just doesn't work. And we're going to go into much more detail on that when the Talmudic crowd starts harvesting. We're going to point out to them, hey, how are you going to do this? This is what do you have, the Star Trek transporter? This is physically impossible. Okay, and once again, they're going to show a preference, not in every case, but a preference for manicured fields and perfect wave sheaves. Okay, now let's just break this down another way. Meaning, if you're allowing yourself to dip into the Talmudic spirit, okay, if you have a Talmudic spirit rather than a Torah obedient spirit, and one of the things that is so confusing is that the rabbis and those who are closet rabbinical in nature, such as the Karaites, that's what they do, is they will say the Talmud is the only valid interpretation of the Torah, when that's clearly false. Because you take a look at what the Torah says and you take a look at what the Talmud says, it's two separate things. Okay, so, but if you have a Talmudic spirit, again, you're going to look for a perfect wave sheaf and a perfect field. You're not going to mind breaking or redefining Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9. But the problem is, even if you do that, even if you redefine Devorah 16 and verse 9, you're still going to end up with your Aviv Barley Firstfruits on the ground unless you cut them early. But we're going to see in the end of this video, that's exactly what's going to happen to Becca Biderman. Okay. Another thing, they tend to lean or incline or gravitate towards using the Equinox or the Equilox, which to us is pure sun worship, because Yahweh says not to pay attention to the heavenly bodies. He doesn't command that. And they redefine Genesis 1 and verse 14 to say, oh no, that's not what Yahweh meant. So again, we're redefining the Torah commandments. So once again, this Talmudic commandments of men spirit is what animates them and motivates them. And because they say they're keeping Torah, that's what makes it so confusing. So let's drive forward. Also about the Talmudic spirit, if you follow the Talmudic model, there's a tendency, not in every case, but there's a tendency for the most part to want to reject hillside barley in favor of manicured fields, beautiful, perfect fields. And this is true even though Israel first occupied the hills when our forefathers first entered the land of Israel in the conquest of the land of Canaan. Okay, so for example, Shoftim or Judges chapter 1 and verse 19 tells us that Yahweh was with Judah and Judah drove out the mountaineers, but Judah could not drive out the inhabitants of the lowland because the inhabitants of the lowlands had chariots of iron. And this is what's so ironic is you're going to see brothers and sisters in Judah in the Talmudic camp, and they're going to want to reject hillside barley in favor of flatland barley, even though it told us right there, Judah couldn't drive out the inhabitants of the lowland at first. They had to content themselves with hillside barley. Okay, so how do we reconcile that? This is from Devorah's date tree on the 11th and 12th of March, 2021. So she's asking this rhetorical question. Why didn't you go to Tel Gamma? And so she's answering and she says, well, Tel Gamma's tall and it's got all sorts of different microclimates. And at different sides of the mount of Tel Gamma and at different altitudes, you have different peaks and valleys. And so you can find barley in extreme range, and you can find barley in an extreme range of development, I think is what she means to say. In other words, you've got barley that's ready, barley that's not ready, barley that's still flowering, barley that's already dropping its seed. There's all sorts of different development stages of barley, and they don't like that. They want something uniform, like a nice uniform parade ground field. So she says, I think it would be nearly impossible to go there and say that the barley there is at a particular stage because there are too many variables. So again, in the Talmudic camp, and we place Devorah's date tree, we know the Karaites say that they reject the Talmud, but they don't really because they use it for all sorts of legal precedents. They make arguments from history and all kinds of things in which they validate the Talmud. So they're in the Talmudic camp. And what they're saying is, you know, we need something uniform. We need something beautiful and level. We need a parade ground. And if we don't have that, so you got too much variability here. Devorah is saying, effectively, we're not looking to provide the first and finest of the sheaves. We're looking for the absolute finest of the sheaves. And what's so confusing about that is, of course, we want to give Yahweh the very finest of the sheaves. But the problem is, Yahweh asks for the first and finest from us. And the Karaite crowd and the Talmudic crowd, we'll see certain Messianics that also fall into the Talmudic crowd, they won't give the first. They redefine Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9 so they can pretend it's the first when really it's anything but the first. Now, also we have, again, we talked about the Equinox or the Equilox. This is Devorah's date tree from about the same time in 2021. She has her report, when does the biblical year begin? And she answers the question right there. It begins with the first crescent new moon after the spring equinox. It has nothing to do with the barley. Barley's sort of irrelevant, and I wish I could find it. She had some post. I wish I could find it. If anyone knows where to find it, please send it to me. She had some post where she said, the barley's nice and all, especially if you're a tourist. But if you live here, I'm paraphrasing, but it doesn't make any difference. So here's a quotation from that same article, When Does the Biblical Year Begin? By Devorah Gordon of Devorah's Date Tree in the Talmudic camp. And she says, in other words, the beginning of the biblical year isn't determined by any particular type of barley field in a particular region, reaching a particular state of development by a particular date. Rather, the Torah states that the beginning of the year is determined by the sun. And that's her interpretation of Genesis 1 and verse 14. We break that down in our video called Where is the Equinox Commanded? We see this as complete sun worship. And the problem is, one reason it's so confusing is they may well think that they're trying to keep the Torah. They think that that's how you keep the Torah, is to add commandments to the Torah so that now you add interpretations to the Torah. So now you are holding the first of the year after the spring equinox, which is exactly what Devorah says. Now, for those of you who are Nazarenes and for those of you who are Messianics, okay, if you believe on Yeshua in any form, what do we do with Yeshua's teaching in Matityahu or Matthew chapter 16, verses 11 and 12, where Yeshua asks, he says, how is it that you don't understand that I didn't speak to you concerning bread? He says, I'm speaking to you, I'm telling you to beware of the leaven of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, leaven being symbolic of corrupt doctrine. It says, then they understood that he did not tell them to beware of the leaven of bread, but to beware of the corrupted doctrine of the Pharisees and the Sadducees, the Pharisees being the rabbis and the Sadducees being the Karaites. So what he's saying here is beware of man-made doctrine. Beware of altered doctrine is not what my father said. They may mean well, they may hope to be serving Yahweh, but they're not doing what Yahweh said to do. So beware of their doctrine, beware of their leaven, especially during the Feast of Unleavened Bread or the Feast of Unleavened Doctrine. Now, I want to ask you please to pray with me for everyone who is involved here. And this is very important. There's people that everyone here, everyone that we're discussing is a member of the nation of Israel. We've got two different houses. We've got two different camps. Now, whether they end up being approved in the judgment is another question, but the best thing that we can do for them right now is to pray sincerely and honestly that Yahweh will please lead all of us to the truth or to more truth, or however it is that you want to say that. So here's a brief presentation plan for what we're going to discuss here. We've been talking a little bit about Scripture. We're going to talk a little bit more about it. Along with that, I'm going to explain why Nazarene Israel now disregards the heat island effect. So in the last video we did a review on the barley inspection site of Mosh N, and we talked about how that would be a good subject for future discussion. We had a lot of discussion. We had a lot of prayer. I've been in communication with Joseph Dumond, And I believe Joe is right about the heat island effect. We considered it. We prayed about it. We think Joe is on it. So I've been trying to work things through with Becca for several years, a number of years now, and it's just obviously not working. So in talking with Joe, I believe Joe has been championing a different approach, and I find myself agreeing with his approach. So we're going to talk about Joseph Dumond's reinspection of 15 March 2026. And what he did, he went to reinspect certain sites. We're going to show those sites near the end of the video. And he found shattered barley outside of any heat island effect, way away from any heat island. And so then after we do that, and we validate Joe's video witness, then we're going to talk about Becca Biderman's search of 16 March, the next day, where she found Aviv barley from a beautiful field. So it's a sort of a perfect manicured type of a wave sheaf. But the problem is either she has to redefine or ignore Devorah 16 and verse 9, or that barley is going to shatter before her projected wave sheaf day. So again, she's adding and subtracting to Scripture. She's changing Yahweh's word in favor of her interpretation. And this is a real problem with the Talmudic camp, which we see her as drifting toward, whether she knows it or not. And again, we are asking for your prayers, for your sincere prayers for the people involved here. Okay, brief review. We just talked about in the last video, we talked about the wild versus domestic controversy. And we talked about how most of the Talmudists are going to prefer a domesticated field for various reasons. Now, to us, it makes sense. It's a good argument. Egypt was destroyed when Yahweh rained hail down on the barley. So if you're destroyed, that means your crops were destroyed. We're talking potentially, yes, probably wild, but also potentially the domesticated barley. The domesticated fields also look nicer. They're more visually pleasing. And this is a theme that you're going to see again and again and again and again. Anytime you're dealing with the two houses, you're going to have Joseph, who has the spirit, and Judah, who has the truth or a version of the truth. And Joseph is going to be drunk, the drunkards of Ephraim, Isaiah 28. They're going to be drunk in this spirit, and they're going to spiritualize everything away. Oh, we have the spirit. That's why we don't really need to do anything. Then you're going to have Judah, who's going to get all wrapped up in the details, and they're going to go round and round and round in the details. And they're going to twist the requirement because they like this requirement better, or they like this variation of the requirement better. So again, it's both houses are messed up in this regard. But one of the things you're going to see in the Talmudic camp is they're going to over-focus on the details. So now you can't just offer the first of your first fruits. Now it has to be the very finest. It has to be a perfect wave sheaf. It has to come from a perfect field. And you see this tendency in Devorah. Brian comes right out and says that. He wants to qualify his field. It has to be exactly this and exactly not that. The sheaf has to be exactly this way and not that way. And Yoel Halevi, I don't really know anything about. I'm going to have to start tracking him and see how he does. He accepts wild barley. He inspects Tel Gamma. So that's interesting. We'll have to check that out. Becca is another, you could call her an anomaly, but we see her in transition at this point. Again, please pray for her. Becca has openly stated her preference for wild barley because it shows her, in her words, it shows her what the land is speaking, or it shows her what the land is doing. And yes, we've received many, many comments from people that say she's corrupting the word, she's using this verse and then twisting it, and basically the overall effect seems to many people to be earth worship, and we can't really refute that. But that's kind of a Talmudic concept anyway. We have to bring that up at some other time. Let's keep moving forward. So then you have in the Torah camp, and I don't want to speak for Joseph Dumond. We have been in communication. I believe a lot of his ideas are making sense. What seems like to me is Joe doesn't care. Is it domestic? Is it wild? He doesn't care. He wants to bring the first healthy sheaf to Yahweh. That's also what we want in nazareneisrael. Okay, whatever Yahweh sends you first. Okay, if it's going to be a wet year, well, we'll get into that some other time. So In most circumstances, the wild barley will ripen first. There are some circumstances where domestic barley will ripen first. It doesn't matter. Whatever Yahweh sends you, whatever ripens first, that's what you're going to offer within certain limits. In Nazarene Israel, we're not going to accept barley grown in a greenhouse. But again, our point of view is we're going to go with what Yahweh commands in his word in the Torah, and we're not going to accept modifications, additions, subtractions, square roots, nothing like that. Okay, so in recent videos, we've also been talking about what's called the heat island effect, or Becca Biderman will talk about hot zones. It's the same thing. But the technical term, I looked it up, is called the heat island effect. So and I encourage you to Google it or duck it or whatever you do. And it says the heat island effect from a blacktop or asphalt road generally alters crop growth in the immediate vicinity, with the most significant impacts on soil temperature and evaporation occurring within the first 5 to 10 meters of the road edge. Okay, so again, Becca is always, there's a Freudian slip. Becca is always teaching against hot zones, and we'll see her teach against hot zones again near the end of this video. But having discussed this, I've been in communication with Joe, and we've been praying a lot and studying a lot here, trying to figure it out. And at this point, what we're realizing is that at least if you're trying to offer a perfect barley sheaf from a perfect barley field and everything is manicured and you're willing to break Devorah 16 and verse 9, or you're willing to redefine it or explain it away or use a historical reference from the Talmud to say, it's really not that important. We've always been able to cut our barley and lay it aside, something like that. You don't really need or even want to offer the first of the first fruits. What you want to do is you want to offer perfect first fruits, not necessarily the first, just perfect. And we're going to see that that's the direction Becca Biderman is trending. But having discussed this with Joe and prayed about it and talked about it among ourselves and studied it out, Nazarene Israel now considers the heat island effect to be completely irrelevant to the Aviv. Because if you think about it, if you want to bring the very first and finest of the fruits, if it has to be the first, you want a heat island effect. So before, in the last videos, just as a clarification, we were talking about validating the witness at Checkpoint Charlie, and we were saying we're not so sure about Mosh N. It seems it's kind of iffy, but it's a point for discussion and prayer. So we've prayed about it, we've discussed it, and we think it's irrelevant now that there's a heat island. We think that we would also qualify the barley witness at Mosh N. So there you go. You're also going to see in these videos, so both Joe and Becca are going to mention rain. Okay, so there's a controversy between what is it that matures the barley? Is it the rain and then a lack of rain? So the barley starts to dry out, the feet start to dry out, and then the barley says, whoops, time to make babies. Okay, that is a factor. And there's also a length of day factor. So again, been doing a lot of research, Google it, duck it, but it says, yes, barley is a photoperiod dependent crop. That means it starts to turn ripe when the days start to reach a certain length, specifically characterized as a long day plant. It accelerates its flowering and development when exposed to longer day lengths. So that means barley can mature in the middle of winter, but it's more apt to do so as the days start to get longer. So that is one factor. We'll see that coming up. And then there's also a weather factor, a moisture factor. So you Google it or duck it. Yes, barley often begins its flowering anthesis phase as the weather becomes drier and warmer. It says, while moisture is necessary for earlier growth, when you want it to make babies, a drier, cooler climate is ideal for barley. So drier when it starts to dry out. And it generally requires drier conditions after coming out of the boot, to successfully flower and mature, particularly to avoid fungal diseases and to promote grain ripening. So what we're finding is that both of these factors, both when the day starts to get longer and when the weather starts to get drier, both of these are going to be factors that lead toward the barley ripening. Just thought I would mention that because both Joe and Becca are going to mention that in their video witnesses. Okay, quick recap. Here's what we're going to be looking for in what we call the true first fruits model, or the Torah model, the first camp. Okay, now for the priesthood to declare Rosh Hashanah, the priesthood is going to have to know that there will be a full sheaf of healthy Aviv barley that with something to eat by Yom Hanafat Omer, the day of the wave sheaf offering, which takes place some 15 to 21 days after Rosh Hashanah. Now that presents some very special challenges, and we'll talk about those in other videos. But in practical terms, what the priesthood is looking for is for the first full healthy sheaf of barley that you then present to Yahweh to get Yahweh's approval to harvest, as Josephus also says. Now, not just the first sheaf, but actually the first omer, which, as Becca correctly points out in another video, is a stack of sheaves. But one of the things we make sure we don't do, we don't want to add or subtract or modify Scripture in any way. Okay, some of the cautions we have here. Now, if we've mentioned before, and we'll mention again, we'll see at the end of this video, if you're going to wait too long, the barley is going to shatter. And we're going to see that is going to be a problem with the Aviv barley field that Becca Biderman just found. And now, once again, we're going to see Devorah Gordon declared the Aviv in 2021 because she says, we know it's the month of the Aviv because the first of the barley has already shattered, which to the Torah crowd, that's just insanity. But to the Talmudic crowd, they want to see part of the barley already shattered and on the ground, which to us makes no sense. But it makes sense if you're approaching it from a Talmudic perspective. Okay, so again, if the Talmudists don't want the barley to be lost, then they need to harvest it early. And again, that requires breaking or modifying Devarim or Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9. So again, one of the reasons it's so confusing is that the Talmudic crowd will tell you they're trying to keep the Torah, but the problem is their definitions of Torah terms have been twisted or inverted. And we're going to see that that's the same pattern we're going to find with Becca Biderman. She's trending that way, whether she's aware of it or not, whether she knows it or not, that's what she's doing. Okay, now this was the fourth barley inspection, but done by Devorah's date tree on the 5th of April, 2021. And in that article, she's so proud of it. She put her copyright stamp on it. She's boasting that she knows it's the month of green ears because the barley is brown and shattered. And to us, that's just, to the Torah camp, that's insane because it is technically the month of green ears. Becca Biderman makes the points like, well, no, there's technical definitions, et cetera, state of development, et cetera. Yeah, that's true. But the point is green ears. And I believe that's the point Joseph Dumond has been trying to make. And having prayed and considered, we have to go with Joe because elsewise you end up with this. And then Devorah will say, oh, well, no, that barley wouldn't actually be lost because you could actually go out and harvest it before the day of the wave sheaf offering because that's how they set aside Devarim 16 and verse 9. So to us, the whole thing is, how do you harvest your barley first fruits once they've already fallen on the ground? It doesn't make any sense. But then again, they explain away Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9 so that you don't actually, the barley first fruits don't fall. You just have to reinterpret Yahweh's commandment. And you justify it because that's the historical example given in Talmud. So this is what brings it all together. Now here's the part, and I don't want to speak for Joe. We still have a few things we're still needing to work out. But one of the things that Cited Moon, Joseph Dumond, and nazareneisrael both agree with is that you cannot violate Yahweh's word. You cannot violate the face value of what he says to do. So, or else risk his wrath. And who needs that? No one. So Devarim, Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9 says, you shall count 7 weeks for yourself and begin your 7-week count from the time you begin to put the sickle to the grain. Now, in past years, we have seen that Becca Biderman has stuck by that. And now, in recent years, Becca Biderman is transitioning away from that. She's transitioning more toward the Talmudic camp. So again, we ask your sincere, fervent prayers for Becca Biderman, so that if she really does love Yeshua and really does believe what Yeshua says, that she will abide by Yeshua's words, that not one jot, not one tittle, nothing about the Torah of Moshe can change until heaven and earth pass away, and heaven and earth are still here. Now, it's interesting, in contrast to the Talmud, Josephus tells us that first the Israelites would bring their barley to the priest would then perform their ritual, and then in the green. And after this, it is that the people and the priests may publicly or privately reap their harvest. So that's how it was done back in the first century. So we bring the omer, the stack of sheaves, symbolic of Yeshua, then we can harvest. Okay, this has been Joe's point all along. Joe's point, he's sticking strong by this, and we have to agree. He's bringing things back to basics. So Strong's Hebrew Concordance, Hebrew 24, is Aviv. It's from an unused root meaning to be tender. It means to be green. And there's nothing about Devorah's first fruits of barley falling on the ground that's either tender or green. It says it refers to a young ear of grain. There's nothing about first fruits broken on the ground that's young. So it's green ears of corn, meaning immature ears of corn. There's nothing about barley that's shattered and on the ground that is immature. It's overripe. It's past mature. It is shattered. Here's another one. I need to issue a correction or an apology to Joe. So I was talking during the video inspection of the Checkpoint Charlie and also the Mash N location. And Joe was using one term for hard dough, and I'm saying that's not hard dough, that's medium dough. And I went to the GRDC website, and their definitions there, they are using the same term. This is the Zadok's scale definitions. So apparently there's more than one set of terminology out there. And it seems like I was trained in one set. I'm not sure, but it seems like maybe Joe was trained in another set. I can't reach him right now. He's traveling back from the land of Israel. So in any case, my apologies to Joe. I think the thing that I want to focus and emphasize on is that what Joe is really saying is, look, the ears are green. It's still green. The barley's not shattered. It's not fallen on the ground, but it's green. It's immature grain. It's not overripe. It's not overmature. It's not brown grain that's already broken and shattered and fallen on the ground. It's green. It's immature. That's Aviv. So we agree. We think Joe is really, it's good. So that's why, another reason why we are switching from Becca Biderman to Joseph Dumond as a witness. Spoiler alert, we may need to go to the land of Israel next year. We'll talk more about that. We appreciate everyone's prayers and support. The trips are expensive, and we've already had to lay off half of our remaining staff. So we appreciate your prayers and support. Now, this is from the University of Minnesota, and there's a lot we can say about this slide here, but one of the things that we need to see is that from the time the barley head emerges from what's called the boot, second from the right there, the head emergence, the University of Minnesota clocked this at 58 days in a domestic field with a certain kind of domestic barley in conditions that may or may not apply to wild barley or domesticated barley in the land of Israel, because the weather changes from year to year. The barley varieties are different from field to field, from farmer to farmer. But notice, in the University of Minnesota study, from the time the head emerges to the time the barley is mature, there's 31 days. So in other words, It's 31 days from the time the head emerges to, now this is another difference, to being modern combine ripe. And this is important because there's a big difference between combine ripe and ancient sickle ripe. So in modern agriculture, when you have the combine comes through, it's got, if you've ever seen a combine, it's got that big rotating paddle wheel up front, and it basically smacks the barley and it slaps it. And when it slaps it, the purpose is to shatter the barley, which also separates the barley from the chaff and from the stalk. And then the machine does a combination of processes, which is why they call it a combine. But that all happens at once, and it can only happen that fast if the barley is effectively overripe. Now, with ancient barley, it doesn't work. Ancient barley, you have to use a sickle. So Becca Biderman points out that this modern University of Minnesota domesticated field with a certain kind of barley scale doesn't always apply. It doesn't always work in the land of Israel, whether you're dealing with wild barley, whether you're dealing with domesticated barley on a hillside or in a field. It gets complicated. And this is what you need, the involvement of farmers living in the land who are experienced, they're familiar. Farmers that I've met, when you talk to them, they say, well, how's your field? They'll say, oh, I'll be ready in 2 weeks. Because they know. Because why? Because they've grown this particular crop year after year upon year upon year. So they have experience, and they just happen to know that, yeah, with this kind of weather, the way things are going at this time of year, yeah, it'd be about 2 weeks. And that's what we're looking for, is to know that we're going to have barley in 2 weeks, something edible in 15 to 21 days after the new moon. Now, this is another image from the University of Minnesota, and this very interesting image. Up in the top left, you see where it says anther opening and fertilization on day 1. Then what happens? So anther opening, fertilized, now it's closed, it's forming a seed pod. Okay, so then on day 2, day 3, day 4, what happens is the barley starts to pump liquid and also starch into the seed head. And then continues day 4, 5, 6, it's 7 days, 8. Now, again, the University of Minnesota is using different terminology. So on day 8 begins what they call the milk stage, day 9, day 10. And then, so what you've got is you've got more fluid and more starch going into the head. This would be like if you were making bread dough in a kitchen, starting with a bowl of water, and you're throwing more and more flour in there, and you're stirring the flour in more and more. So it gets thicker and thicker and thicker and thicker as you get in there. Then on around day 12, now you've got something in there. You've got, but it's still liquid on day 12. So it's still in that milk stage. Now, when you reach day 14, it starts to enter what's called the dough stage. And apparently there's different terminologies, different definitions, but basically my understanding of milk is that when you squeeze it and it pops out, that's milk. And you can have early milk or late milk, or you could have thin milk or thick milk or something like that. But if you rub it, it's going to go away. It's going to disintegrate. And then how you know it's entered the dough stage is, one, you can no longer squeeze it. If you squeeze it, it won't pop out. And then if you try to rub it, it's not going to disintegrate. Now, what's interesting here, and again, this chart is done by the University of Minnesota, which is a very different climate than Israel. Minnesota is a northern cold weather climate. Israel is more like a Texas climate, and then an elevation to be more like, not sure, Oklahoma or Kansas type climate, or maybe Colorado type climate, not sure, except it doesn't get that much snow. And then, but between 14 and 21 days, you've got your dough. And again, when you rub it, it's something persistent. It's not going to disintegrate. It's not going to go away. Now, what's interesting about this is that we have 15 to 21 days from the time of the new moon until we have to have something edible to present to Yahweh. So what that basically means, and again, it gets really tricky. You'd have to have experienced farmers in order to do this. But what you might be able to extrapolate from that is, if you have barley that is either in or past the flowering stage, then 15 to 21 days later, you should have some kind of dough to present to Yahweh. Now, we'll see. I'm a cardiac patient. I need also another surgery. Praise Yahweh, I've got insurance coverage for that. We're going to have to juggle the schedules and see how everything works. It gets complicated. If I need to go to the land of Israel, then we will try to go to the land of Israel, Yahweh willing, Yahweh permitting, everything else permitting. If anyone else goes to the land and you're there inspecting barley before the new moon, we would be interested to know, can you inspect when it's flowering the day before the new moon, and do we have dough 15 to 21 days later on the day of the wave sheaf offering? Again, I would think that you would need experienced farmers in order to be able to judge the weather, judge the season, judge where everything is, that you would know. I believe that in ancient Israel, when you have people growing up, they've been barley farming their whole lives, I believe that's something that they would be able to determine. Of course, again, barring some new ice age or some blizzard, some extreme snowstorm coming in from Yahweh, which of course would slow everything down. So again, this is an average chart, doesn't apply the same in every year, doesn't apply the same to each strain of barley, but this is the general progression. Barley obviously progresses in this order. It's just a question of how fast. Okay, we need to talk about, just real briefly, we're going to invoke the fair use clause because we're doing research and scholarship and teaching. We're going to get into some criticism, particularly of Becca this time. This is from our Aviv Barley Simplified series. And again, just to point out how Becca has changed. And I just want to point this out. I was kind of like, what, how did, I was so thankful to Yahweh when he showed me that Becca is drifting toward the Talmudic camp. And one of the things that this slide shows is that she was in the Torah camp back in 2021, because back when this photo was taken and we were working together with her, she was still trying to present the first full sheaf, or maybe the first full omer, the first full stack of sheaves of Aviv barley to Yahweh, in order to clear the way for the rest of the harvest. And now you'll see in her video witnesses of this year and the one at the end of this video, she's changing. She's migrating more towards the Talmudic system. Now, I want to be careful to say this correctly. This is the letter that we got from Joseph Dumond. And Joe says that Becca is manipulating the information. In other words, she'll report on this field and not that field. She won't be able to find the rest of Joe's barley fields in Checkpoint Charlie for whatever reason. We don't know. We can't say that she's not doing that. Let me just leave it there. Okay. But again, I think the thing that's important to say is that depending upon which spirit you have is going to determine what kind of observer bias you have. So if you're looking to bring the very first sheaf of healthy green barley, if that's what you do, then you're going to interpret fields a certain way. Or if you have a Talmudic spirit and what you're looking for is a perfect parade ground or a perfect field of barley and you want a perfect sheaf, if you want a 10 out of 10, so to speak, then you're going to reinterpret Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9 a different way. And that's obviously going to affect how you interpret the barley that you find. So you're going to qualify this field, but not qualify that field differently, depending on whether you have a Torah obedient spirit or a Talmudic spirit. And again, we believe, sadly, Becca is transitioning from a Torah obedient spirit, face value, Peshat spirit. We believe she's transitioning to a Talmudic camp spirit. So again, please join us in praying for her. Okay, we already covered that in the last video. Now, here's another one that Joseph Dumond shared with me in the communication. I thought this was very insightful. So there's a controversy. Do you want the true first fruits, green Aviv first fruits, Or do you want a perfect sheaf of perfectly beautiful manicured fruits, harvest fruits? Which one do you want? Depends on what spirit you have. So Job points out Bereshit, or Genesis chapter 4 and verse 3, where it says, in most versions translate, in the process of time, it came to pass that Cain brought an offering of the fruit of the ground to Yahweh. Just an offering, nothing special, not the first, not the finest. But he points out that in the Hebrew, what it actually says is at the end of the days. So in other words, at the end of harvest time. So not the first, not the beginning of the harvest time, Cain brought an offering. So it wasn't the first and it wasn't the finest. But the point is, it wasn't the first because he brought it later. So then continue to verse 4, it says, and Hevel also brought of the firstborn of his flock and of their fat, or of their finest. And Yahweh respected Hevel and his offering, but he did not respect Cain's offering. So when you look that up, when you consider that, it's like, okay, so what Joe is pointing out, I believe correctly, is no, what you need the first of the first fruits, not just any fruits and not just what you're calling the first fruits, but you really need the first of the first fruits. So just because I know someone's going to ask for this clarification, the last we spoke with Joe, he still does not believe that you need to give the people 14 days advance notice. In Nazarene Israel, we do believe you need to give people 14 days advance notice. We believe that retroactive declarations are not found in Scripture and that they don't help because the people need time first to receive the word. Even in an electronic age, it takes time for people to get the word. Then you have to make your arrangements, pack your bags, buy your plane tickets, hotels, rental car, whatever you're going to do. You have to get to Jerusalem on time. You have to be able to take a lamb on the 10th, whatever kind of wrinkle that introduces into your schedule. And that all takes time. So we believe that in Scripture, you need those 14 days. Joe presently does not believe that. Please pray with us that Joe will understand our need to give the people notice on time. Again, if Joe continues to believe in retroactive declarations, then we're going to have to find some way to go up ourselves. And that's going to be a real struggle for us at this particular point. But please pray that Yahweh's will be done and whatever Yahweh says. We're happy with that. What we want to focus on in this presentation instead, basically you might call the green Aviv versus the brown Aviv controversy. And we want to show why we're going now with Joseph Dumond as a witness instead of Becca Biderman as a witness, or at least with Joe's idea that what we're really looking for is green heads of grain, which we believe is correct. So what I want you to do is I want you to ask yourself, we're going to show Joe's reinspection, and then we're going to show Becca's reinspections. And I want you to ask yourself, now, which is more important? Do you need the Torah model, which is to bring the true first fruits, the green, Aviv, immature first fruits, in obedience to Yahweh's commandment and not breaking Deuteronomy 16, verse 9? Or is it acceptable, or maybe even better, to bring beautiful first fruits, perfect first fruits, in keeping with the Talmudic spirit, even if it means that you let the true first fruits fall to the ground, and even if it means you have to break or redefine Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9. Okay, so that's the question. So now let's go to our videos. We're going to start with Joe's reinspection, starting with the pump house area.
So there's the one of the places where the barley was dismissed because it's too close to the roadway, too close to the wires, too close to the building. All these takanot that people put on things to disqualify what Jehovah has planted and sown of his own. So, okay, let's discount that. Let's give them the benefit of the doubt. But that barley over there was shattering 3 weeks ago. You can see it turning brown there in front of the building now. So I've gone across the road on the
Now notice he's well outside of the heat island effect where he's standing. I'm not sure exactly how far he is up the hill, but notice he's going to take us, he's going to scan the hill. It's going to be well outside of the heat island effect.
this hill. And if you look, the hill is already turning brown. Now you're going to, they'll dismiss this for something. Oh, there's a rock up there, or there's a rock over here. Well, there's rocks throughout all of Israel. But I want you to look at the barley. Look at the barley right here. You see that? Watch. It's brown.
Okay, and again, we don't believe in smacking the barley. We don't believe that really proves anything, but to flick it like that. But what we do agree with completely is he's just trying to keep things basic. He's saying, look, the barley is already brown, and the Talmudic crowd is going to try to bring the first of the first fruits. They can't, because the first of the first fruits is already shattering and on the ground. It's already turning brown. It's no longer green, it's brown.
That's a good piece of hard dough. But you can see this whole field up here is already turning brown. And it's not near any wires. It's not near the road. It's in the field all by itself. Let's see.
So just looking up that hill, he is well away from the road. There's no possibility that that's heat island effect. That's just barley turning brown.
Okay, the barley is brown here in the Jordan Valley. And if you're keeping Passover in April, well, you're not offering Jehovah the first fruits. And that's just the plain fact. See, I'm not even flicking that one, and it's already shattering.
Now that we consider shattered barley. That's completely legitimate. He's saying, I didn't touch it. I didn't even look at it until now. It's already shattered. That's shattered barley. So it's way too late to harvest the Aviv.
They've already shattered the first heads. See, look, they're already shattered and gone. You can see the tops half gone. That's not sheep eating them, but they're already gone. So just notice, we kept Passover 3 weeks ago on March 5th. We had Wave Sheaf Day on March 8th. Today is March 15th. Now that's just a little wee patch here, another little wee patch over there. But look at that whole hill. Look over there.
Now, if you belong to the Talmudic crowd, you're going to disqualify that hill because you want something on the flat. Brian Convery would call that goat grass. But in ancient times, if that was part of your inheritance and there was food there, especially in a famine year, you would definitely harvest and eat that. Okay, keep going.
But
here.
I'm showing you what the barley's doing. We've shown you the lambs. We've shown you the flax. We've shown you the birds. We've shown you the grapevines. They're already all out. So I'll give you probably one more little report up the road here, but I'm quite confident Passover was March 5th. And if you're keeping Passover in April, you will not be offering Jehovah the very first fruits of the barley as you're commanded to do. If other people say you can store them up and wait and offer it later, Deuteronomy 16:9 disagrees. You begin the counting of the wave sheaf from the time you put the sickle to the grain. And this barley here needs to have the sickle put to the grain now.
We find that to be all solid reasoning.
But I'm showing you what the barley's doing. We've shown you the lambs. We've shown you.
We just did that.
The flax. We've shown you the birds. We've shown you the grapevines. They're already all out. So I'll give you probably one more little report up the road here, but I'm quite confident Passover was March 5th. And if you're keeping Passover in April, you will not be offering Jehovah the very first fruits of the barley as you're commanded to do. If other people say you can store them up and wait and offer it later, Deuteronomy 16:9 disagrees. You begin the counting of the wave sheaf from the time you put the sickle to the grain. And this barley here needs to be have the sickle put to the grain now.
That to us sounds like solid reasoning. So now Joe's going to take us to checkpoint Charlie, and he's going to give us a reinspection on those fields there. He says some important things here. We'll try to.
There's where the boys checked the other day over by that valley, and I can see it's all turning brown. I may check that in a minute. But in the meantime, I'm going to go up here. Look, see the white out there? That's wild barley. See the white way over there? That's wild barley. I'll show you that in a couple minutes.
Now, again, Becca would disqualify this for heat island effect because he's right there on the road. But again, if you're trying to bring the first of the first fruits, that's an irrelevant. It's irrelevant. So he's going to go here. He's going to come up. He's going to come closer. He's going to show us that the barley's already shattered, even a distance from the road. And he hasn't flicked it, nothing.
See that? It's already shattering.
Now, Becca's going to disqualify this field because it's not pure barley. Also, it's near the roadside. But again, you're losing barley. Barley is shattering. So obviously, at this point, it's too late to bring the first of the first fruits.
Already shattering all by itself. Right here, it's already shattering. There's rows of it out there, already shattering. Oh, look at this. Here's a patch of green right in here. Some coming out the boot. Now I can stand in the middle of this and say that this isn't ready yet. Maybe there are another 30 days. But if I'm going to look at all the evidence, and not just my selected choice net picking area, it's already shattering. I just want to point that out to you. And it's raining here in the Jordan Valley at checkpoint Charlie, March 15, 2026. So I'm standing here in this green patch and I just squished it. This is worm, right? See? Now I can make a case that it's not ready yet just by showing you this, just that piece of film. But if I look up, oh look, there's a whole bunch of brown barley over there. And a whole bunch more over here.
Now, Devorah is going to look typically for a uniform quality to the field. She wants to see the whole field ready for what you might term a combine harvest. And of course, not all fields you can run a combine in. Some fields have rocks, this kind of a thing. But in ancient times, when you're out there with a hand sickle, what you would do is you would harvest the brown patches as they are ready, and you'd let the green continue to grow. And I don't want to speak for Joe, but it seems like what he's saying is that some of the Talmudic or closet Talmudic or Talmudic leaning or heading toward Talmud searchers will disqualify the field in general because it's not uniform. So remember, Devorah said she would disqualify Tel Gamma because it had different microclimates and it wasn't uniform.
And a whole bunch more all the way across that field.
Continuing.
Look for the evidence. Look for all the evidence and weigh it. Do not get deceived by being selected by only being shown a little bit of the green, still young and fresh. So this is where we did the wave sheaf ceremony 8 days ago at the end of the Sabbath as the sun was setting. You can still see the rain clouds in the sky here.
Now, some of the Talmudic camp searchers will say that you can't have the Aviv yet because it's still cold or it's still wet or it's still raining, this kind of a thing. And what Joe is trying to point out is the word Aviv means green. The barley's already turning brown. So the clouds are not, they may be a factor, but they're not the only determining factor. So you really have to discount them. You can't disqualify the harvest because it's still wet and cold.
So it doesn't have to be to the end of the rainy season. That doesn't count. It's not the amount of rain either that counts. It's not the equinox that counts. What counts for barley is the number of daylight hours.
So yes, barley is a photoperiod dependent plant. The amount of daylight hours definitely does have an effect. And obviously, clearly, looking right at it, the barley can become ripe prior to the spring equinox. Clearly, we're taking a look at it.
See this here? It's already shattering. Already shattering. You see the ends are already gone. Right? Now, there's the green patch over there I was just in. There's a highway there 100 feet away. There's another green patch right there closer to the highway.
Very interesting.
And I'm going up that hill to show you all this field. There's a green patch there by the bush. Again, you need a 20 by 30 foot square area to get enough barley. And we got this and there and there and there. I'm not going to go out in the field, but in order to discredit this evidence, you got to discredit the whole field, which some people are doing. Sadly, because it disproves their takanot. It disproves their takanot.
He's saying they're adding, the commandment is to find green, immature Aviv barley. That's what he's finding. And all these other searchers are saying, well, we don't like the field because there's rocks. We don't like the field because there's this. We don't like the field because it's not uniform. We don't like the field because there's still some oats in there, this kind of a thing. Joe's saying, if you start adding to scripture like that, you're going to miss the fact that the barley is past green now.
Jehovah said to give me the first fruits of the barley, the green ears of the land, green ears. And you can roast them.
If it's got sufficient starch content, meaning if it's entered into the dough stage, yes, you can roast them.
Get the moisture out, turn them into seeds so you can grind them into flour. Leviticus 2 tells you how to do that. Don't be deceived by people's takanot. Don't be deceived by being manipulated into, oh, this is all green, it's not ready yet. See? Look at the whole area. Look at the whole area. Joe Dumont, Jordan Valley, March 15th, 1 week after Wave Sheaf Day, on March 8th, 2026. More coming. Okay, there's Checkpoint Charlie right there. That gray roof, that's where you gotta go through the checkpoint. As you can see, it's pouring rain. I'm getting soaked. Right there is green barley. Right there is barley that's starting to turn. There's green barley on top. Down here, by the edge of this field, is wild barley that was not planted. It was all grown by itself. The farmer planted wheat. See the wheat underneath. And all the way down here along this edge is lots of golden brown wild barley. And if I zoom in on that guy right there, look, he's already shattered. He's gone. There's nothing there for 3 weeks from now when everyone keeping Passover according to the Hillel calendar. I don't go by the Hillel calendar. I go by the barley. I let Jehovah tell me, in the month of green ears, make a wave offering. We did that. Down at the bottom of this hill, we did the wave sing ceremonies after the Sabbath was sitting. The barley is brown and it's shattering. You can see it. I've shown you all the way up and down the Jordan Valley. If you can get some here, look, that one there, right? It's pouring rain. There, I just gave it a flick, it's gone again, right? It's not about the rain. It's not about the rainy season. It's about the barley being ripe to make a first fruits offering. Correct. In the month of green ears. And we've been showing you the green ears the past 3 weeks, 4 weeks, 14 witnesses. 14 witnesses have testified the barley is Aviv. Now I can travel much faster today because I'm all by myself. Everyone now has gone to Jordan to get back home. It's the amount of daylight that the barley gets. Look, this barley here is bending over, but it's still green. It's still green. Now, is that the right barley? Or do you look at this barley over here? In order to keep people's takanot, somebody's got to dismiss this whole field and say that it does not count. Jehovah says it counts. Jehovah's the one that let it grow. Not you, not me, not anybody else.
So we agree with the witness that Joe is bringing. This is the kind of reasoning Becca used to do, and then Becca has been transitioning away. I was still learning from Becca. She's a very knowledgeable, very intelligent woman, very capable woman, but her spirit, quite frankly, began changing, so her definitions began changing. So I'm trying to follow for several years what's going on with Becca in the fields. Finally, last year, she cuts me off. Here comes Joe, Yahweh sending Joe to say, we're keeping a simple Aviv barley. It's green, it's immature, green heads. That's it. That's what the scripture says. Let's not add. He's going to say no takanot and ma'asim. That means don't add. Just go by Yahweh's word. That's what we believe in Nazarene Israel. So that's why we're switching to Joe. Please pray with us that Joe will start inspecting prior to the new moon. If he doesn't inspect before the new moon, we will have to go, or hopefully someone else can go. And then we will verify the reports from here. It's just going to be difficult with budget and difficult with travel time and surgeries coming up, this kind of a thing. But Yahweh will provide. Appreciate your prayers. So what we want to do now, we want to go to Becca's reports. Now, Becca is going to disqualify, just like Joe is going on. He's saying, you can look at this patch, that patch, you can disqualify for this, you can disqualify it for that. We're going to go now to Becca's report, and we're going to see Becca do just exactly that. Becca's going to disqualify Joe's report. We're going to go to the checkpoint barley is still lacking, but there's a field nearby that's ready now, dated 16 March 2026. So here we go.
It is 2:16 p.m. on March the 16th, and it is not a rainy day. Not a rainy day, so I went and checked the checkpoint there in the Jordan Valley, and I will show you what I saw there. But first, I want to do for you what we did at Mashin. I want to acquaint you with the area.
So she's going to give us an overhead.
I don't have really time for that if I want to get you guys the information in a timely manner. So this is the information on the Jordan Valley checkpoint. And first of all, I just want to give you the overview. This area here.
Now notice she's going to disqualify this field. She's not going to focus on green heads of grain. She's going to give you reasons, according to Talmudic understanding or a Talmudic spirit, why this field is not a perfect field, why it will not yield a perfect looking omer, so she can disqualify the field, therefore disqualify the barley within it.
Is the area of the checkpoint. And this road runs from the checkpoint. This is the field area. And not all of that will make a field. Probably about that much makes a field. The rest of it's scrub brush. And this is not a clean field of barley. There's a lot of oats and other things, another grass that grows in
It's
there.
not a perfect field.
And so it's not a clean field of barley.
It's not a clean field.
And
I
then
don't
the
like
other
it.
thing that I want you to know is,
Not is it the first of the barley, is do we like it? Is it technically beautiful or not technically beautiful?
see if I can move this out of the way. No, I can't. This margin right here is where the video from Sighted Moon that was recorded yesterday, this is where he was in this hot zone along the road. In fact, the first day that they inspected, and it was a lady named Rose, I think, they were standing right here. How do I know? I know this area. I've been coming here for 10 years. I can tell that that's where they were standing because I could see the trees. I could identify this tree and this tree in his video. So that's the first thing I want you to know. All of the inspection, and I believe even the declaration of the Aviv barley, happened from this hot zone here. All of this is a hot zone. Right about here, there's a big knoll or a small hill, and all of this right here, it runs along the road.
Okay, so from a Talmudic understanding, you want uniform barley throughout the land of Israel. So no matter where you are in the land of Israel, you've got barley to harvest so that everyone can bring an omer or a sheaf of barley up to the priest. That's the Talmudic understanding. The Torah-based understanding is you want to bring the first of the barley to clear the way for the rest of the harvest, as Josephus also says. So notice what's happening here. Becca is clearly transitioning away from the understanding she had back in 2021, and now she is developing a new understanding, becoming more and more and more in line with the Talmud. Every year she says, I'm learning so much every year. What she's learning is she's learning to become more like the Talmudic understanding. She's developing a Talmudic spirit.
And then you park right there, and I walk up here and I enter the wild field. Again, hot zone. Go back and look at the video that was posted by Sighted Moon about 12 hours ago, longer than that now. It was about 12 hours ago when I got up this morning. And you will see that he is showing you where he declared the barley and is still declaring the barley shattering in that area. So that's the first thing. I'm going to get you a better picture here of the area. Okay, here's a better picture. And this is where that runs up towards the end of the field and towards that hot zone. And the barley only really goes to about right here, and then it kind of like peters off, and there's other scrub brush and stuff in here. And again, this is not a clean field. It really bothers me that this is not a clean field, but I inspected it.
It's not a perfect field. It's not a parade ground field.
So some things that I know about this field, let's talk about that.
She doesn't like it.
The early area is always the same, and it is always a line of barley that rests on this lip that is positioned between the domestic wheat and the wild barley. There is, when this comes out early and when a person depends on it, there is no square area of like a 9 by 12 or whatever your dimensions in this area. It's just linear. It just runs along that knoll unless you go back up over here. The barley does happen to be more attractive and fuller, but it's in the hot zone.
So again, she's disqualifying the field, just like Brian Convery also will disqualify a field.
So this is always the early area. This barley in this location is always inferior, and I'm talking about in general. The barley is always inferior, always greatly staggered in maturity, always empty heads, always very thin grains, always thin grains that still have a little white tuft on the end, and yet they're like leather because they didn't have time to mature all the way.
So if you've ever seen Brother Judah offer unleavened, they do strange things in for Pesach. they just go to great lengths to have the perfect unleavened bread. Or they'll go to they'll remove the grout between the tiles in the shower to get rid of the possibility of any kind of a leaven. So again, you have Joseph spiritualizing everything away, it's like, well, we're offering Aviv barley in our hearts, so we don't need to organize and actually offer Aviv barley. And then you have Judah going overboard with, oh no, it has to be the perfect barley from the perfect field. It has to be a perfect wave sheaf. It has to make my heart sing in my spirit, this kind of a thing. So Judah over spiritualizing, Judah over focusing on the physical aspects.
It's notorious for two flushes. When the first flush comes, it does not mature before the second flush overtakes it. It's notorious for that. And it makes harvesting the first flush impossible. And to harvest the first flush, you're going to lose 50% or more of the second flush, not of the second flush, of the harvest altogether. Along that hot zone, and
if it makes a difference, I can't track that. But go ahead.
Now, today, in another area, I saw areas where deer bed down at night. This area is very common for that. The reason I think that the barley is not good is because this area was raised and reworked into its current appearance a few years back. And it took a couple of years for the wild barley to even begin to grow here. And it has begun to grow, but it is not a beautiful crop.
It's not a beautiful crop. It's not a beautiful crop. Nothing about the first of the first fruits. It's not a beautiful crop.
And the only thick barley is when we go up into the hot zone up here. I don't think there's anything left to say about that area. I'm going to show you some videos of me opening the barley there. And I'm very unhappy about this barley.
I'm very unhappy about this barley. Not as it the first. I'm very unhappy about this barley. That's a Talmudic spirit talking.
It's sparse in the areas that are not the hot zone. It is sparse. I'm looking at areas that are 5x5 and 6x6 that I'm saying, okay, can I take a sickle to this? Can I cut this? And does it make sense? Does it make sense, or am I having to sort a lot of immature grains out of mature grains to make up that omer because it's already sparse? And I'm not happy about this process. So when I left, I was pretty down, actually, that I thought that that's what we were going to get for the year. However, this morning on the way to the checkpoint, I had just bared my heart to Abba. I said, Abba, can you just give us something, just give us what we're looking for.
Just give us what we're looking for.
Give us the comfort and bless us so that we can know before the new moon that there's something that's acceptable to you, not sparse, scraggly barley in an area that only has hot zone barley for the other option. Can you really just give us something?
So what Yahweh has told us is to bring him the first and finest. Her attempt is to bring the finest, but she will not be bringing the first, because the first, as Joe has pointed out, is already shattering and falling all over the ground.
And he did. So before we go there, I want to show you what I saw in this field so that you can understand what I'm talking about, sparse barley. In the next video at the checkpoint, I have already done about a 4x4 area that looks like I could find anywhere from 7, 8, 9, and 10, those numbers in there.
She's rating the sheaf.
So I can put the sickle to it, so it can be a clean cut.
And if it doesn't rate high on her scale or her inspection, her quality index, then she figures she can't put the sickle to it. Not that it's not harvestable, not that you can't physically harvest it, not that you couldn't harvest it and then eat it, but she can't harvest it because she doesn't like it. It doesn't make her heart sing. It doesn't make her happy. That's not the kind of perfect wave sheaf she would like to be seen offering to Yahweh. So very different criteria depending upon the spirit involved.
It can have some substantial gain. I'd already done that.
So she wants to have substantial gain for her efforts. And if she doesn't have substantial gain for her efforts, then she can't put the sickle to it. That's her line of reasoning.
And this is the second time I'm doing it because, again, the thick barley is in the hot zone. When you get in the part of this field,
the thick barley is in the hot zone. So there's plenty of barley there, but it's in a hot zone. So that means the fields will not be uniform. So she's looking for the whole field to be uniform and beautiful. That's a very different spirit, because what we're looking for in the Torah camp, we're saying, give me the first patch, just like she herself would have looked for back in 2021.
It's not a hot zone. The barley is very sparse. And you're going to look at the ground after I've collected the barley, and you're going to say, where's the barley? Because I've got barley in my hand, but when you look at the ground, you're not going to see a lot of barley. I cannot explain that phenomenon, why the barley would be thicker along the hot zone, other than that has not been tilled and scraped and reworked like this centerpiece has between the two fields. And so I went ahead and did that, and I'm showing you that you can harvest this now, but I want you to see with your eyes how much barley there is there and compare it to the next location I'm going to take you, where when I prayed, Abba, please give us what we need so that we can just have rest for Shabbat. Just give us the thing that we need so we can have rest. And ahead of the new moon as well, whether or not you call it the new year.
So this is one thing Joe has been complaining about, is that Joe will find barley and then she will disqualify the field, and then she will compare it to her findings, of course, disfavorably.
And so I had just prayed that, and I was looking at this, and I want you to notice what is at the checkpoint and where I'm going to take you next.
Okay, so she's going to take us to a different field next, and she's going to compare it to Joe's finding at checkpoint Charlie.
And what was at checkpoint Charlie? You can see the difference in the field. This field is a beautiful field of barley.
This field is a beautiful field of barley.
I would not be ashamed if I was to take this to the temple.
I like this field better.
The other one, I would be hanging my head. It was inferior.
She doesn't like that field because that field isn't of the same high quality as the field she likes better. Not is it the first, not is it still green, not will it be green at the time of the Aviv Wave Sheaf offering, but she likes it better. It makes her soul sing, so to speak.
We still have this area that's near Tel Te'omim. Okay, this area is presenting very young. There's nothing in these heads, and this is not too far up the road from where we were.
Now, this would be Joe's point. We already have barley shattered and on the ground in other places of the country. Why are we still looking at green barley?
By the checkpoint. It's still coming out of the boot.
The reason she's still looking at green barley is because she likes this field better. She qualifies the field like the Talmud does. So it's a beautiful field. It's not a hot zone. The barley's planted more together, etc., etc.
This is blown down from wind, but there's nothing I can feel. There's nothing in these heads. And so this area is presenting very, very young. GoPro, stop recording.
Now, she's going to say some things here. She's going to talk about what this is very important to understand. She talks before about can she sickle harvest it? And what she means is not is it physically possible to sickle harvest it. What she means is, does she like the sheaf that she would get if she were to sickle harvest it? Would it give her a beautiful sheaf?
I don't know why that turned off. I didn't touch it. I want to know that thick and plenty of barley to put a sickle to?
I want to know that there is thick and plenty of barley to put a sickle to. She wants to feel that it's worth her time to go through and sickle harvest this. When the reality is, in ancient times, especially if there was a famine, you would put your sickle and you would harvest so you could eat. But she wants to present a beautiful wave sheaf to Yahweh.
And then when I think it's ready, I'm going to do what I'm doing right now and check the grains. That's Aviv. That's Aviv. Check the grains and make sure that the ratio there is what I'm looking for.
Make sure that the ratio there is what I'm looking for. So what she's looking for is a 7 or an 8 or a 9 or even a 10 out of 10 on her objective quality scale. And if she doesn't find a 7, an 8, a 9, or a 10 on her subjective quality scale, then she's going to say she can't put the sickle there.
So when I use the sickle, it's profitable.
She wants to feel like it's worth her time, or she's going to disqualify the field, which is why she disqualifies the areas that are already turning brown.
I'm not throwing 50% away to get some Aviv out there.
So this is why she talks about a first flush being followed by a second flush. She's not interested to bring the first to Yahweh, the first and finest, to clear the way for the rest of the harvest. She wants to bring an aesthetically pleasing, a perfect sheaf.
If I get a first flush I can harvest, I go with it. But if I don't, if it gets swallowed up by the next flush, it doesn't make any sense. That's definitely Aviv.
If she doesn't get a perfect sheaf, it doesn't make sense to her. So therefore, she says she can't put the sickle.
That's 4.
Okay, so she's going through, and what she's going to do is she's going to go through and she's going to inspect the whole sheaf. So to save some time, I'm going to fast forward just a little bit here. Okay, so I'm jumping forward here a little bit to the end of the sheaf.
Especially as they start drying. Okay, we've got 9 of 10 that I randomly pulled out of this little, it's not even really a sheaf, it's a handful that I cut in the field. 9 of 10.
Okay, so it's questionable. It could have been 10 out of 10. I gave that one away because I've never had a perfect score before, 10 out of 10. But I hope you can see the difference in the quality of the barley.
I hope you can see the difference in the quality of the barley.
I was looking at here with my cell phone at the house that came from the area of Tel Talmud. I have one more thing I want to share with you.
And then she's going to show us an aerial view on Google Earth. And she's going to qualify the field with an overhead shot.
To get to know the area where that barley, this last barley, come from, the area around Tel Talmud.
Where's the commandment to do this in the Torah? Is it in Leviticus? Is it in Deuteronomy? Where are we told to go to Google Earth in the Torah to qualify the field?
This is the aerial view from Google Earth. And you can see how small these houses are and how far away that would be from any kind of a warm zone.
So again, this would be Joe's comment that we're adding to Scripture, we're adding requirements, what Joe would call takanot and ma'asim. So these are the kinds of reasons, again, why we're transitioning away from Becca Biderman and we're transitioning to Joseph Dumond as a witness. Please pray with us that Joe will want to inspect before the new moon day, or that some other qualified barley team will want to inspect before the new moon day. So my assistant Rivka, not Becca Biderman, but my assistant Rivka, she has a keen ear for irony, and so she's always cracking jokes at me. So she sends me a couple of funny images, and this has a doctor inspecting the perfect wave sheaf from the perfect field, the perfect family tree, so to speak. And he says, well, I have good news and bad news. The good news is that, yes, you are Aviv. But the bad news is you're not going to make it to your next wave sheaf day 3 weeks from now because you're going to be shattered and on the ground. And Becca Biderman's wave sheaf day is going to be 3 weeks from the day that she harvested her sheaf and made her declaration. So another doctor says, I'm afraid it isn't good news. It could be any day now that you shatter and fall to the ground. He says, but doc, I have a very important date in 3 weeks. I've got to still be in the sheaf for the day of the wave sheaf offering, which is when we start to cut, which is when we start to count. And of course, he's not still going to be in the ear on the day they start to cut and the day they start to count, because barley only lasts in the ear for a very short period of time, which is precisely Joseph Dumont's point, which is why we have so much confusion in Israel, is because we have two separate groups preaching two different things in the barley camp in Israel. You have the Torah Model camp, which would be at the moment Sighted Moon and nazareneisrael. We use the true first fruits of the barley, symbolic of Yeshua, our first fruits. And then you have the Talmudic model, sadly, which Becca Biderman is transitioning to. And again, they have a penchant for perfect sheaves from perfectly manicured fields, but the problem is their timing is all wrong. This requires breaking or redefining Deuteronomy 16 and verse 9, and a whole bunch of other problems that we're going to see in other presentations as we continue moving forward. So I would like to encourage you all, please, to pray for everyone who's involved, everyone who is a barley witness. Please pray for the witnesses that went. Please pray that Yahweh will raise up other witnesses. So it's going to be very difficult on us if we have to go inspect in Israel next year. So please pray for Yahweh's will to be done, whatever Yahweh wants done, and please pray for his provision for that. If you have questions or comments, loving questions, loving comments, please leave them in the comments section down below. Don't be surprised if it's something basic, if we refer you to the website to do your own studying, because what we're finding is there's a lot of people, they're just basically sitting on their thrones and expecting to be served. I don't know what their concept of the world is, but there's a lot of people that just seem to think that we have nothing better to do than to spoon feed people answers, and we've just laid off half of our remaining staff. So we appreciate very much those of you, those few people who are supporting the ministry. Please know that you are earning yourselves a good day of judgment. Okay, there's a big difference between people who know they're called and they're just seeking to be spoon-fed and have someone else change their diapers, and people who are growing up to become spiritually mature believers who are trying to do their part and take their part in the nation. In order to get a good day of judgment, you've got to do your part. It's better to give than just to receive. That's news to 96+% of the people in our movement. Most of the people here, they're here to see what they can get for free. Feed me for free and then clean up after me. That seems to be the ethic. It's spiritually immature. That won't get you a good day of judgment. You want a good day of judgment, you need to help build the kingdom. If you're not part of the solution, you're part of the problem. So again, please leave us your loving comments and your loving questions down below. If it's something basic, don't be surprised if we refer you to the website, because part of getting a good day of judgment is you have to know the doctrine. You have to know what you're doing and why. Because if you don't know what you're doing, you're going to end up worshiping on the wrong days. You're not going to get a good judgment. Or if you don't make a contribution, you're not going to get a good judgment. So please pray with us for everyone involved here, both in the house of Joseph and in the house of Judah. There's a lot of people, they're presently misled in the Talmud. That doesn't mean they're not our brothers and sisters. That doesn't mean they don't need prayer. And the vast majority of Joseph, They're educating themselves by reading the right book, but they're not doing what they know. Brothers and sisters, if you're not doing what you know, that's called hypocrisy. That's the one thing you don't want to be, is a hypocrite if you want a good day of judgment. Get involved, take part, make this a priority. Put Yeshua and building his kingdom first in your lives. Seek first the kingdom, and then everything else you need will be added to you, including a good day of judgment. So, why do we have the barley wars year by year? Is because we have confusion, particularly because of certain witnesses changing camps and teaching the wrong thing. We're going to talk a lot more about this in upcoming videos. Please pray with us that Yahweh will bring clarity to all of the barley witnesses, and that all of the barley witnesses are going to start to work together according to a clean doctrine. And if they don't, that the people will realize this and turn away from those barley witnesses that are teaching according to Talmud, contrary to the Torah, because the Torah prohibits adding. Thank you very much. May Yahweh be with you all, and please pray for everyone in our movement. Shalom.